Oh, hello. Today we're going to do the much trailed, I should say, the much requested faction rundown for the Exaction squad kill team, otherwise known as the Adeptus Arbites or Arbites in Warhammer 40,000 kill team. So, introduction. The Exaction squad have access to security and seek and destroy, and they have one of the more puzzling kind of sets of options to try and assemble that first team, that all-comers team, that question of what do I build from my box that I've purchased, right? So you've got to have a Proctor Exactant. The Proctor Exactant has exactly two loadouts. He either comes with a combat shotgun and a repression baton, or a Dominator Maul and assault shield. So there's a lot to unpack with those two options, so we're going to wait till we get to the slide concerning him, and we'll talk about some more. Then you've got the Exaction squad, so 10 more models from the following list. So you've got you've essentially got 8 specialists: the Castigator, the Chirurgent, the Leash Master, the Malachite, Marksman, Revelatum, Subductor, the Vox Signifier, and the Cyber Mastiff. And additionally, you can top that up with 2 gunners from the choice of 3 that you have. And then you've got 4 shield guys, 0 to 4, that you can have, and you've also got a basic Shogun guy who is called the Vigilant. Essentially what you're doing here is you're taking, if you start in your mind with the leader and the 8 specialists and 2 gunners, and then you think, which 4 of these do I want to swap out for shield guys? Bearing in mind that if you only have 1 box, you're pretty much locked into taking the Cyber Mastiff as part of your 11-man team. If you get hold of that second box, you can replace that Cyber Mastiff with something else. So that's another concern there as well. So difficult. We're going to try and tackle that question as we go through, but it is difficult to try and work out. Okay. They have one ability. It's a simple one, but it's really has a profound effect on the game. So you can shoot into combat is the short version. If you're shooting at a weapon that doesn't have the blast special rule or the word grenade in its name, in the select valid target step of the shooting attack, if you are within red, so enemy operatives within red can have other friendly operatives within engagement range and still be selected as a valid target. So you can shoot into combat as long as you're within red, which is a really big deal. We're going to start by looking at the basic troops. So I've put 2 things on here for basic troops. The Vigilant is the absolute Billy basic vanilla arbiter. Yeah, he's the basic guy. So he's got the very boilerplate standard human stat line: 3 circle move, APL 2, G8 1, Def 3, 4 up save, 7 wounds. He has a combat shotgun. So the combat shotgun, 4 dice hitting on 3s, 4/4 damage at short range, so always doing in range red. If you're outside range red, you have to fall back to your long range profile, which is 4 dice hit on 5s, 2/2 damage. And he also has his standard little repression baton, which is not bad. It's 3 dice hit on 4s, 2/2 damage. So he doesn't care to crit, which is interesting. None of the Arbites seem to have as a thing that their damage profiles are generally very flat. And of course he has that rule of efficiency rule that we looked at. You won't be taking any of these Vigilants in kill team because all of the specialists that we're going to look at have a shotgun, more or less, right? So they're all this plus something. There are very few where you're actually losing something. So one example of where you do lose something is where you flick toward the Subductor, who he's kind of a specialist, but you take 4 of them, so he's kind of a basic trooper. I've put him here because the contrast is interesting. You get +1 to your save, first of all, for being a Subductor, so you're a power armor guy. Effectively, not in the lore, but effectively you're a power armor guy. You're a space marine, you got 3 up save. You gain the Shockmaw and Assault Shield. So the Shockmaw and Assault Shield has its 2 modes. Look, mechanically, just think about it. It has 2 different weapons that you choose to use. Okay, So the offensive profile's 4 dice. Well, both profiles are 4 dice. Hitting off 4 damage. If you choose to use it defensively, it has stun. Not very exciting. But there it is. Defensively is really interesting. So you're always the attacker if you're attacking defensively. And if you choose to parry, you can parry 2 dice with 1 action. So these guys are basically really effective tanks or tar pits or whatever you want to say. You know, people aren't going to want to charge your subductors because they know they charge you, they fight you. You are going to get the opportunity to neutralise 2 of their hits before they do anything. So they've got to be charging you with something that they're pretty sure is going to get like 3 hits, right? Because if they charge you and you roll a crit, well, straight away you can neutralise 2 crits. That's quite good, right? So they're very survivable. And then if you win the balance of dice, you've got some. You haven't, you got 4 damage. That's fine. But realistically, you're not hoping to kill people with these. You're hoping to lock them up in combat, and then your other arbiters can come along and pop people in the head in combat with their shotguns, right? So you use them as targets to pick people up, and then you can use your ruthless efficiency rule to kill them that way, which is interesting. So I think the subductors seem to be fairly key. It's just not clear what of the rest of the tools that you go without. So let's look at the Proctor Exaction. So he's got almost a full page for his data sheet. He's got a lot going on. First of all, just to flip back, so you've got the basic rules here, standard thing of having +1 wound, okay. He's also got +1 weapon skill, ballistic skill across the board on most things, except, +1 weapon skill and ballistic skill across the board. So, good. Except he's still only on 4s with his repression baton. So if you take the shotgun, you don't get a weapon skill bump on your, backup nightstick, basically, which is a bit weird. So if you take the shield and truncheon loadout, you do gain the bonus to your save that you get from the shield. So you get that 3+ save characteristic, which is good. And you've got the repress and the shield rules as well. So you do effectively gain the shield loadout that we gained on the previous page. Except notice this is a dominator maul, so it's in the effect, which basically means in the offensive, it's getting that lethal 5-up as well, which is not that relevant. Or you can have him with a shotgun. It's a bit of a difficult choice. I think ultimately, a 2-up shotgun is good. At close range, that is good. That's going to be very consistent damage. I think ultimately, the best option is to go with the melee. Because you're going to have a lot of incidental access to shotguns throughout the team anyway. And not 2-up shotguns. Not 2-up or 4-up. There'll be 3-up and 5-up. But I think, especially if you're struggling to fit the shields in, or even if you just want a 5th shield, I think the way to go is to build him up with a shield. If you've only got 1 box, but let me know in the comments what you would do. I think ultimately this is a 2-box team, and you want to own both and play around with both and see which one you prefer, right? But yeah, shield. So he also has the Nuncio Aquila. The Nuncio Aquila is really interesting. It's got a few little wrinkles to it. Nuncio Aquila. Each time an enemy operative will perform mission action or the pickup action, if that enemy operative is within blue of your Nuncio Aquila token, or this operative, if the token has not been placed, we'll come to that in a minute, 1 additional action point must be subtracted to perform that action. When determining the control objective marker, the enemy operative total APL is 1 less. So, if you haven't done nothing, if you haven't deployed your little droney thing, then effectively you get an aura of blue around your leader. That means that it's 1 extra to do a mission action, it's 1 extra to pick up, and you count as 1 less when holding an objective, which is pretty strong. Now, for 1 AP, you can detach your Nuncio Aquila. It can go and fly around on its own. So you kind of detach it as a token. It can then move red, which is pretty similar to moving 3 circle, right? But and it can move any distance vertically, so effectively has fly. And it's invincible because it's a token. There's no way to remove the token. There's no rules here for removing the token. There's nothing, no sense that when the Proctor Exaction dies, the token is removed, unless I've missed something. So detaching it does make it invincible and give it the ability to fly. It costs you 1 AP to do it. But it's not necessarily... Now, this is where it gets a bit weird. That when you're measuring from the model for the aura of blue, you're measuring from blue from the edge of the base. I think these are on 28s, right? But it's blue from the edge of the base. Once it becomes a token, it's going to be blue from the center of the token, technically. So that means that you are kind of removing the, you're giving yourself a bit less coverage by detaching the drone. I don't know where this was intended, but it's not been FAQ'd as of yet. The only thing that's a bit interesting is that the kit actually does come with a model to represent this token on a 25mm base, I believe. So whether it will eventually get FAQ'd that it's when it's detached, it's a radius of blue from the edge of the 25mm base, or whether they still want it to be from the center, even if that comes to pass, it's still a bigger base that the Arbite is on when the token, because he's on a, I think he's on, he could be on a 30, he's on a 32 or a 28, but he's certainly not on a 25. So it's just one to think about there, and it's one that I think probably is getting misplayed a lot because it comes with this miniature, and people are just naturally, because it makes logical sense. And if you play casually, then I'm not here to tell you what to do. Like, I don't think it breaks the game. To measure the blue from the edge of the modelled base on the modelled token, but because it is a token and not a model, technically it's a point on the centre, which is the kind of point that is true, and it makes me feel dirty to have to say it, because like you'd hate to have that pointed out to you mid-game by your opponent, and you'd be like, why is my opponent this way? But they would be correct to point that out. So knowledge is power. Know that, think about it. If you don't like it, write it in an email to the FAQ team. If you detach it, you do kind of significantly decrease the radius, but on the other side, you do give it fly, and you make it functionally invulnerable as far as I can see. So, take that for what it is. Maybe you just wait till the Proctor Exaction looks like he's about to be really killed, and then you can kind of evacuate your Nuncio Aquila so it can fly around and continue to have an effect on the game, even once the Proctor Exaction seems likely to die. I don't know. Right, so we'll zoom through some simple ones. So you've got a Vox signifier. It's a comms. This particular flavour of comms is infinite range, but requires line of sight. So not the best comms we've seen. It's not the Kazakin comms, but it's not the worst comms we've seen because it is infinite range. Okay. The Shogun is a medic. He can put back in 2d3 lost wounds, or he can resurrect you on 1 wound. Everything there is totally standard, so we just go whiz through those two and come on to the more interesting Revelatum. So the Revelatum's a really interesting lad. He has a scoped shot pistol, 4 dice attack, hitting on 3s, 3 on a normal, or 1 and 2 mortal wounds on a crit. So because he's hitting on a 3+ at infinite range, and the damage profile's not that bad, he's kind of in your top 3 for long-range firepower with his pistol, which is weird, but there you go. He has a really good ability called First in the Field, so at the end of your initiative phase, in the first turning point, if this operative is wholly within your drop zone, it can perform a free normal move as if it had fly. Really good, especially with the changes to, it's harder now to cap the primary, so being able to zoom up the field to score a primary point in turning point 1 that you perhaps otherwise might have been impossible for you to score with a APL2 guy is really good. I feel like it would be nice if he could open a door as part of that, just because that ability is going to be a lot stronger in it's going to be a lot stronger in an open play environment, right? You're going to be able to get far up the board with it. into the dark because he can't open the door, then he's just, in a lot of the point maps, he's just going to be able to like wobble right up to the door and go, well, I've moved like effectively a dash to get next to this door. You know, so it would be nice if they could change that, but probably they won't. You know, but he certainly really good on open boards. Maybe want to leave on the bench into the dark. I don't know. He has a soul guilt scan. So the soul guilt scan, it costs an action point. One enemy operative visible to him within red of this operative until the end of the turning point. Friendly models visible to him within blue of the operative treat that enemy operative as if it was on engage order. Yeah, it's nice and it's quite powerful. He has an ability that means he wants to kind of jet off at the start and be quite separate from the rest of your team. So then, how much the rest of your team is going to be within blue of him to benefit from this? And maybe it's designed just for himself, right? So he uses his free move to get somewhere, and then in his activation, he does Soul Guilt Scan and is able to shoot somebody down who's on a conceal somewhere. But then he'd have to get within red of them with his one free normal move. It's not like it's got a very long range. I don't think this is a bad model. I think he's a must take on open board, certainly just for his first in the field ability. And I think that his shot pistol's pretty good. I just think he's a little bit of a confused model. Like, he has a really long range gun, but a normal range gun, but it's quite rare in this team. But also he kind of smashes forwards, and then he has his action where he needs to be near to the opponent to use it. He should be within red, but he doesn't really. He needs to have his buddies with him so they can benefit from it, unless it's kind of designed just for him to benefit from it. But so I don't like the model, but I still think it's worth taking. If you just ignored Soul Guilt Scan and it wasn't there, it would still be a model that was worth taking. So the fact that Soul Guilt Scan is just a bit confused, in that it's a good ability, but it just doesn't mesh with his other abilities. I think it just gives you more options, right? And maybe it gives you something to do Into the Dark where you're not really going to send him a whole extra move forwards for the rest of your team. Malachite. Quite like the Malachite. So the Malachite is an action monkey. So standard thing, except that he can, once per turning point, do a free mission action or pick up action. Well, not a free action, sorry, but reduced by one less action point to a minimum of 0. So that's really good, especially on Into the Dark, because it means you can get in through doors and things, which is great. He also has this ability for 1 AP. Essentially what it does is he can tag an enemy operative that he can see with no range limit to give all your models can counter normal hit as a crit against that model for the end of turn. It's a nice ability. They've done this thing where if you have an action guy like this who's got a free action point, then generally you're really wanting to leverage this by getting onto something that you would otherwise be unable to reach. So you're doing a move, a dash, and then a free action, right, a lot of the time. So then spending an AP to do the Verisant ability, like that's going to be a thing that you maybe do with him turn 2, turn 3. It feels a lot like the Star Strider's Tech Priest with interesting abilities that people weren't using because they wanted to use him to move forwards and then tag objectives. Again, if these guys seem to be underpowered, I could see this becoming a 0 AP action, the Verisant thing, ultimately. We'll see how they go when they've been played for a bit more. Right? Sorry about that, I think I muted it. We'll see. Still a little bit under the weather. Marksman. So the Marksman's a little bit sad. He's a silent sniper, and silent snipers are great, but he's not like a guard silent sniper because his sniper rifle is 4-1 with 3 mortal wounds. So it's these Arbite's obsession with really flat damage profiles that are like 4-4. So he's only going to do. He's not going to get the kind of output. He's not going to do sniper levels of work. Basically, he's not going to get you the kills against hard targets that you might get from a Vet Guard sniper or a Kazakin sniper or something like this that's got that 6 on its crits, right? It's heavy as well, which is sad, but it is a silent weapon, and silent weapons always have their place, right? It does have this take aim ability, so if he's in a little sniper's nest that you've built with the new, well, not that new anymore, but the ability to put your barricade up on a vantage point and then not have to really worry about moving your guy, then you can give yourself balanced and no cover, which is not bad, but it doesn't, and it's going to get more of your dice through. So maybe if you can afford to do the 2 AP every turn you shoot, maybe you get some decent kills with this guy, right? But it's just a shame to me that he's got kind of not as good as other silent snipers that are already in the game. But he's not bad. Gunners, so 3 in 1. You know how it is with gunners. You've got a grenade launcher, a heavy stubber, and a Weber. The Weber feels super pointless. Like, yeah, it's 5 dice, hitting all 3s, but it's 2/2, lethal 5-up stun. I don't think I can see a scenario where I would take the Weber. Like, doesn't matter whether it's open board, into the dark, doesn't matter what the matchup is, doesn't matter what the missions are. I cannot see a reason to take the Weber. I can't see a reason to not take the grenade launcher. It's mobile, it's got a crit of a 6, it's AP1. It's weird that the grenade launcher doesn't have a frag grenade option with blast, which just seems odd, given what we know about grenades in 40k. And when I was sort of speculating about this team, I thought they might get like, oh yeah, and the grenade launchers might have like choke gas grenades as an option and all these different things, because in Necromunda, the grenade launcher was one of the cool pieces because you could put all these different grenades through it, and actually for them to get less grenade options than other teams is a bit funny. But, it does just give you that little bit of spike damage that you're not really getting from anywhere else in the team, because you don't have a plasma gun, you don't have a plasma pistol. So this is kind of your, if you need to kill a hard target in one activation, this is the guy that's going to have the best chance of doing it. So I would always take the grenade launcher. Heavy stubbor's interesting. 3, 4, 5 damage, 5 dice, hitting on 4s, 3, 4. Ceaseless Fusillade heavy. Well, Fusillade's pointless and heavy's a bad thing. Most of the time you're going to take it. Actually consider the board layout. And how, like, if you're playing into the dark, you're definitely not using this turn 1, are you? Because you've got to get in position somewhere. If you're even on open boards, you've got to look at the fire lanes, look at where you can deploy. If you can get a nice little place for him to set up where he's reasonably safe and he's going to be useful all game, then you maybe want to take him. But remember, as we're going through this, like, it seems bizarre, doesn't it? In no other team would I ever say, like, oh yeah, you obviously take both gunners. But remember, we're looking at places where we can potentially swap things for shield guys, and I'm sitting here thinking, is the heavy stubber with heavy? Heavy's just really bad, right? But then again, 5 dice, 3, 4 damage with ceaseless is gonna do a decent chunk of damage. So I think most of the time you're taking the heavy stubber. Okay, I just think it's lodge in your brain that maybe not every single game the heavy stubber. Okay. Yeah. Right, the Leash Master and the Cyber Mastiff, I've put these on the same page because they really should be the same. You would never take one without the other. So the Leash Master is a basic Arbite and everything that entails, with 2 basic abilities that set him out from the rest of the gang, the squad, whatever. He has this ability called Handler. So each time he's activated, you can activate a ready, friendly Cyber Mastiff operative at the same time and complete their actions in any order. So you can kind of interleave their activation, so you can move him and then charge the dog and then shoot with him and then fight with the dog, right? That's pretty cool because it means that if you lock someone in combat with the dog and the dog doesn't manage to kill them, he can then be in a position to shoot the person the dog's in combat with, which is pretty good. He also gets you a free, just for taking him, you get to buff your dog, right? And then you can use a command action for 0 OP to change your buff every turn. So you can buff him to the dog to have Relentless on his attack, his melee attack, which is quite good. You can buff him to give him plus circle his move. Bear in mind the dog, as we'll look at his profile in a minute, only has 3 circle moves, so Swift just makes him as fast as other dogs at 4 circle. Or you can give him an extra point of save to give him a 3-up save, which is also pretty good. Depending on what you're trying to do with him, I think we're looking at Swift or Aggressive, depending on what your preferences are for that game. But remember, you can, while your Leash Master's alive, swap him around. If your Leash Master dies, you're sort of stuck then on the attack pattern that you were on. The dog has exactly the same stat line as a human being, Arbite, right, which is slightly weird. But there you go. Now you can buff his movement back up to more dog-like speeds if you want to. He doesn't have a shotgun, but he does get a mechanical bite, which is significantly better than a an Arbite's repression pattern. Because it's got an extra dice, so it's 4 dice, and it's got a crit, it's a 5, and a base damage of 3, so that's really good. You can only do the gather evidence mission action in the gather evidence mission, which we'll look at when we do the faction Tackops. You can't do any other mission actions, which is kind of fair. You can't do a generic pickup action, although they don't have access to that deck anyway, so they wouldn't necessarily be using that even if they had it, so that's not really anything lost. Now, this apprehend ability, really thematic, I think kind of pointless. So, 1 AP, select one enemy operative within this operative's engagement range. That enemy operative suffers D3 mortal wounds until it's no longer within this operative's engagement range. It's apprehended. Each time an apprehended enemy operative will perform a fallback action, your opponent must roll 1d6, adding 1 for the result of each wound it has remaining that's greater than its operative's remaining wounds. If the result is less than the operative's remaining wounds, that enemy operative cannot perform the action, and the action points are refunded. So, you have to burn your action point. Say you charge, instead of fighting, you do this. Now, advantages to doing this, it means that you can do D3 damage without getting hit yourself, which is nice. And then it makes it hard for them to fall back. Like, I see what they're trying to do, but your dog is not particularly tanky. So, I would have thought most people in that situation would prefer to activate and then simply kill the dog with its 7 wounds. Of course, that by doing that, they're opening themselves up to the potential of dying because the mechanical bite's not bad. It's fine that it's there. And given that you have Handler and you can intermesh your things, I think far more likely you're going to be charging with your dog, right? And then shooting the person you've charged with the Handler. And then actually, I think where you'll end up using the apprehend most is if you've got a guy left on 1 or 2 wounds that maybe your Leash Master's just shot, right? Then maybe you do apprehend just to do D3 mortals without potentially being... but then you've got... Your attack's got a base damage of 3, so... No, I can't see apprehend coming up that much. I think for what he's trying to do and the kind of play he's trying to get to tie people up in combat, you've got a better tool for that job, which is a shield guy. So you basically ask, you're not better off taking 2 shield guys rather than the Leash Master and the Cyber Mastiff. Because they are quite unique in how they work, and they are interesting and thematic to use. But is that kind of interplay that they have where they can mesh up their actions and do different things together, is it actually going to help you to achieve your goals more than just a shield guy? And having 2 shield guys, I think, is in most circumstances going to be better than having the Leash Master and the Cyber Mastiff, and they're going to do very similar jobs, right? So, but then this is a loadout that's only possible with 2 boxes, because if you have the 1 box loadout, you are forced to take the Cyber Mastiff, and if you're taking a Mastiff, you want to take a Leash Master. If they'd released a separate box, and so it was able to get 2 boxes, then you could be looking at placing both of these with shield guys, which I think is probably the play. Castigator, the guy in the big spiky leather mask, definitely not a sex thing. I don't know. He just wants to show the Dark Eldar. I mean, the joke's been made, but he just wants to show the Dark Eldar a good time, given the box that he was released in. So, this guy has a shotgun, but also has an upgraded melee weapon, so he has, 4/4 damage, hitting on 3s, 4 dice, with rending as well as stun, which is quite good. He has a really weirdly powerful rule called, something focus, engendered focus, right? So he ignores any or all modifiers to this operative's characteristics, including modifiers to the weapons it's equipped with. So there's an FAQ action on this one. This means that if you are striking at someone with damage reduction, they don't get to reduce the damage of your maul when you hit them in the face with it, which is pretty nice. I did clarify though, some cheese sellers were trying to apparently argue that his defense couldn't be modified by the penetration value on weapons, so he could never be basically give him effectively an invulnerable save. Obviously not what they intended. That's been taken away, so your defense characteristic can be modified. Doesn't matter though if you're injured or if someone tries to take APL off you with some kind of ability. You've just got this very consistent kind of, but it is only 4/4 damage. So his main thing is not necessarily being a beat stick. He kind of covers similar territory to the shield guy, right? In that he's a bit tanky, so every time he would lose a wound, he does have this 6-up feel no pain type save. And then he has this arrest idea. So you can perform a fight action with this operative against a valid target. Effectively, when you are performing a fight action, you instead say that you're going to do the Castigator's arrest action, and then you do your fight action, and then if you're both alive at the end, you have then arrested that person. And so while you're in engagement range with him, that person that you've arrested can only pass. And if you really want to, there's nothing to stop you. You could charge in another Arbite into engagement range and then fall back with your Castigator, and then your Castigator could want. That's a lot of action points, right? Because you can't just walk into engagement range and walk out of engagement range, even if they're arrested. So you're going to have to charge someone in, and then, and later on you can you can fall back with this guy, but. It's interesting. It does only work against models with wounds of 10 or less. So if you're fighting against Space Marines, certainly I think if you're fighting against Space Marines, this is a candidate to swap out for a shield guy, because you can forget his entire Castigator's arrest ability exists against one of the teams with more than 10 wounds, right? You might still think he's worthwhile because you like the feel no pain type save, or maybe you're playing against. If you are playing against Space Marines, maybe you really want that. They can't damage reduce your maul if they're Nurgle Legionaries, or if they are intercessors with durable or something. So that's quite nice. So yeah, an interesting model for sure. I think most of the spice is really in that engendered focus ability. The arrest thing has got a lot of the chat because it's interesting. It's right there on the card. It's very wordy. But the fact that he can't be subject to modifiers makes him a very interesting piece. Let's look at the equipment. The equipment's interesting. So you got frags, cracks, and stun grenades. I'm not really going to talk about these. If you like them, you like them. You're going to take a crack grenade. You may or may not want a frag grenade. You probably don't want a stun grenade, depending on your school of thought on frag grenades. They have a lot of options for 1 EP equipments, so quite often you only have one EP thing to go for. So it's like you take your crack grenades or whatever else you're taking, and then you go, well, and I guess I'll take one of these even if it's not very good. But they've got 3, so they've got the shot pistol, so you can give this to a shield guy or someone else without a ranged weapon and give them a ranged red 4 dice hit on 4s 3/3 pistol. It's not brilliant, but I suppose it gives your shield guys something to do if they end up with the spare action point, if they move and then they kind of want to be charged and they get to shoot somebody. I guess that could be a thing, right? You've got reinforced mirror visor, which is one of these pieces of equipment that means that you can never have your APL modified or be affected by stun, which is always funny to give to a medic, because medics take an APL penalty for reviving somebody, and you're like, well, I've got cool mirrored shades, which means when I revive you, I don't take an APL penalty next turn, which is always kind of worth doing as an upgrade on a medic, I feel, even though it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it is how it works. And then you've got the one that I think is truly impressive, which is the strobing phosphor lumen. Yeah, try and ignore the humorous mental image of this meaning the Arbites have like just a red siren on their helmets. That right, because that's strobing phosphor lumen. I don't mean a siren. I mean the thing that goes with the siren, the flashing light, right, just like on its head, red or blue, depending on which side of the Atlantic you reside. I went for red, despite being British, but there you go. But the point here is, I guess, that you know, it stops people having rerolls, right? It stops anyone within red of your operative having rerolls, and against certain teams, I mean, Intercessor's got shed loads of rerolls, Novitiate's got shed loads of rerolls. There's quite a few teams out there that have shed loads of rerolls. Against certain teams, just going, no, I've got 10 of these things. You're not 10 because you take grenade, but you know, you take 6 of them, whatever you're doing. You just turn off rerolls to a wide area. It's a nice range red, radius red, ability as well. I really like that one. Against certain teams, they're going to shrug and go, we don't really do much trade in rerolls, so then maybe you look at other things like pistols or visors. I didn't talk about the manacles. The manacles give all of your guys the ability to do the arrest action, which, don't forget, entails a fight action. It's 2 EP, and it only works on people with a wound characteristic of 7 or less. Now, this could be hilarious on your shield guys if you are playing against a 7 wound team. Give it to your combat guys. Why not? It will just be quite funny. Now, obviously it just depends on the matchup and whether you're fighting against a team that is a 7 wound team. But against that 7 wound team, I think manacles can be quite hilarious, right? Because you give all your shield guys manacles, and then it's like, well, if you charge my shield guy, not only is my shield guy probably going to survive, but then you're just going to be stood there for the rest of the game until I decide to move my shield guy or I send a shotgun guy to come and shoot you in the head. Makes charging that shield guy an even less amusing proposition, right? Ploys. Got a lot of ploys. So we got Guilt reveals itself for 1 CP until the end of the turning point each time a friendly Exaction squad operative makes a shooting attack. Enemy operatives must be more than 2 circle instead of just circle from it to be in cover. Really good. Really, really good. It's going to really mess up teams that really want to mess around with conceal orders and cover. And you want to be close anyway. You want to be close in with your shotguns anyway, using that decent shotgun close range profile. So I really like this one. Really, really good ploy. One of the main kind of tricks, I think, in the portfolio of the Arbites. In Violate Jurisdiction, 1 CP, at the end of the turning point each time a shooting attack is made against a friendly Exaction squad operative that's within the circle of an objective marker or enemy operative in the roll defense dice step the shooting attack, you can reroll one of your defense dice. That's pretty good. I mean, it's not damage reduction, so that just means it hasn't just been nerfed. It's a defense dice reroll. It's not bad. It's not great. You've only got a 4 up. It's rerolling into a 50-50. It's not. You're going to want to use it where you feel like you're going to get a couple of these in the turn at least, right? But it's not bad. Dispense Justice, I don't really like. Each time a friendly Exaction squad operative fights in combat in an activation, including an enemy activation in which it's not moved, not moved more than its movement characteristic. Okay, so where it's not charged, or it's tricky, isn't it? You can do a charge, but as long as the charge didn't end up needing the extra range, then you've not physically moved more than your movement characteristic. Even though you've declared the charge, then you can reroll on your. It's a lot of work to get a reroll, and always in the back of my mind is like, well, I have to spend. It's a strategic one, so I have to decide that's what I'm doing at the start of the turning point. Whereas I can just have a reroll for free in the middle of the turning point, so I'm only going to do this if I feel like in the turn I'm going to get at least 2 rerolls, right? And then the extra clause about movement there, it's just a few, for me it's just a few too many moving pieces. Maybe it's because I'm a simple-minded idiot, okay, to get it to work. On the other hand, I quite like Tonal Decree, despite it being nearly the same thing. If you shoot somebody and they're within 2 circle of you, then you can re-roll one of your attack dice. And just because that's how you're going to want to play there. You're going to want to get your shotguns within that. I mean, it's not quite 2 circle. You don't mind being within 3 circle for the close range, but you want to get quite close. It synergizes with Guilt Reveals itself as well, and it gives you re-rolls. I can see that generating a lot more re-rolls in a turn in which you use it than this one. So I quite like Terminal Decree. That's quite good. Over here we got Long Arm of the Emperor's Law, which is sort of funny. It effectively, what it does is it turns off your opponent's scouting step action. You know, sometimes that you can just see somebody's placed an operative on a vantage point, for example, with no cover in their deployment zone. You're like, oh, they're about to go and put a barricade in front of him, and then you're not getting that barricade, and they're like, what? And then you can just shoot the guy in the face, which, you know, so if it's kind of a gotcha, because if they know that you're Arbites, they'll know that you can do that, and they'll have thought about that. But just having it on your sheet does to, and maybe, you know, it's not wrong that you can just remind your opponent, or you know, I can spend more DP and stop you getting your scouting. You know, it's almost a question of which is more morally correct, because if you don't tell them, and then you gotcha them, but you have had to spend a CP for the privilege. If you tell them that you have the ability, so that they don't make it so that you needed to use it, then the ability's had an effect without needing to spend the CP, right? So either way you cut the cake, you are profiting by having this ability. Exact punishment. So this is kind of fun. It's just something I really like to see, where it's not something you plan for, and then when you get the scenario and it comes up, you're like, yes, 1 CP, and then I kill you. Because basically this is, well, I'll read it. Use a tactical ploy after an enemy operative fights in combat or makes a shooting attack against a friendly Exaction Squad operative within blue of it. That friendly operative is not incapacitated. That friendly operative can immediately perform a free fight or overwatch action, but can only target that enemy operative and only if it's a valid target. So if somebody like smashes into you in combat and you just about survive, and then they're also quite heavily wounded, you can just be like, right, well, 1 CP, we're going to fight now, and now I'm the attacker because I'm performing the fight action, and then you just whack them on the head with your truncheon and they die, which that could be quite cool. Not something you're really going to plan for, but a nice thing to have in your back pocket. Brutal Backup is interesting, but very fiddly, so use this tactical ploy after a friendly Exaction Squad operative performs a fight action with combat support. One of the friendly Exaction Squad operatives that provided combat support can immediately perform a free fight action, but can only target the operative from the previous fight action and only if it's a valid target. Challenging to set up, and it will need you to set it up, and if you get that off, it can be really powerful, right? Execution Order. Execution Order is mental. You can only do it once, and it's effectively a bonus rule for your Proctor Exactant. You spend 1 CP, and then you've got, when you activate your Proctor Exactant, select 1 enemy operative in its line of sight until the end of the battle. Each time a friendly Exaction Squad operative fights in combat or makes a shooting attack against that enemy operative, in the roll attack dice step of that combat or shooting attack, you can re-roll any or all of your attack dice. You can only use this tactical ploy once. So you designate your enemy's baddest guy, as long as your leader can see him, and everything in your team for the rest of the game is re-rolling all its dice against that guy when it attacks them. That's pretty good, right? Tackops. So they got 3. Quite like them. Seize or Incapacitate. Reveal this Tackop in the target reveal step at the first turning point. Select 1 enemy operative to be the criminal. If that operative is incapacitated before it's removed from the kill zone, place one of your criminal tokens underneath the operative as close as possible to the centre of its base. Friendly Extraction Squad operatives, excluding the RVR Cybermassive operative, can perform the pickup action on that token while not in engagement range of enemy operatives. Subtract circle from the movement phase while they are carrying it. I wouldn't take this if it was literally just nominate an operative and kill it. The fact that you have to do all this other tenuous stuff to get your second VP, and it makes you not move, I just don't like this one. I really don't like anything where you're saying to your opponent, that guy that you have on your team that you control is crucial to me scoring my Tackop. because then that opponent goes, okay, well maybe I just stand this guy in this corner, and yeah, that has value, as we always say. Like, you're playing that, and it might even make you win the game. But in the environment in which, and I've said this before, in the environment in which I'm playing the most competitively at Warhammer World, if I win the game because I've used something like this to designate one of your guys, and then you've hid that guy in a corner, I've not got those 2 secondary points, and secondary points are going to be really important to me. So I'm not going to take something like this. If you only care about W versus L, right, then it could be really good, because you can pick one of your opponent's really key pieces that you know they want to bring forwards, and they go, well, if they hide that piece away, then you've won the game, right, because they're not using one of their key pieces. But I don't want to give that person the option of just kind of screwing over. If I can win a different way, I would rather do that. So I've made that point before, and doubtless somebody's going to pop up in the comments and go, actually, you know, that's a Wild World problem, that's not a game problem. Other tournaments in my native land of wherever do it this other way, and fair, okay. But I can only talk about things based on my lived experience. So I don't like it just because their ability of your opponent to just deny you those 2 secondaries if they decide to just be that way, right? Contain the threat. I think this is quite doable. So at the end of any turning point, if every enemy operative in the kill zone is within red of your opponent's drop zone, or within a circle of one operative, you score 1 VP, and if you do it in any subsequent turning point, you score 1 VP. This is quite good because you want to be up close and personal with your guys. Many of them are combat guys, many of them are short-range shotgun guys. I think if you outnumber your enemy, this is quite a doable thing. You know, you're not really trying to contain them all in their kill zone. That rider is really only there so you don't have to trudge somebody into the kill zone to get their radio man or cup lady that is standing in the back of their kill zone going, well, I'm doing a thing and I'm never going to engage with you. You know, but you just send them out and mark them with one of your men, and then you, I think, eminently scoreable. Eminently scoreable. And then we've got gather evidence. I also quite like gather evidence. So you reveal it the first time you perform the gather evidence action. So you have to perform an extra action for 1 AP. So don't take this on when the mission is loot, otherwise you'll get really upset with yourself. But effectively, for 1 AP, if you perform the action, once you've gathered evidence from an objective, that objective is gathered and can't be gathered again. And then, essentially, as long as you have 2 models that have gathered evidence alive at the end of the game, you get your 2 VP. The reason I phrase it that way is there's nothing here to stop you gathering evidence on all 6 objectives with 6 different models, right? It's not as if you can only do it twice. Yes, you do have to get the guys that survive to the end of the battle and gather the evidence, but you can gather evidence with 6 different guys, so I think that makes it quite scoreable. Also, your dog... I was going to say also your dog can do it, but I just realised that actually only your Malachite, your Revelatum and your dog can score this one, which it contradicts what I just said, right? Sorry, I should read things more thoroughly. So that makes it more difficult, especially since I told you don't take the dog necessarily and take 2 shield guys. I still quite like it, but it does just mean they're playing really cagey with your Malachite and Revelatum, so actually perhaps I like it a lot less, and perhaps I prefer Contain Threat. There you go. Last minute correction. Let's see what else you could take. So you got Security and Seek and Destroy. I've highlighted 2. I think Rout and Rob and Ransack are really good fits for this team. So I think we know what Rout and Rob and Ransack are. I just wanted to say I think they're really good fits for this team. Final thoughts. These really need 2 boxes. I think that the reason that nobody really knows what this team is, and the reason it took me such a long time to get my head around doing this video, is you look at it and you go, wow, this is all really cool, I want to play with it, but you really feel like you need 2 boxes. I think the kind of meta list is going to be, for most matchups, is going to not include the dog, which is why it needs 2 boxes. But also just to play around with them, I think you want 2 boxes. I'd be really interested in your thoughts on what that kind of starter all-comers team list should be, because this is one of the teams I've had difficulty with. You know, a lot of teams you can look at it and go, well, yeah, this is basically how you should play it, and that's going to get you the best results. This is a really weird team where I can't really see it. I can't really work out what the consensus is on how many shield guys you should put in, but I feel like you want to play with as many options as you can, have that roster be flexible, change every game, and that's just going to necessitate that second box, which Games Workshop haven't released for us yet, because Games Workshop having these logistical problems that I've shouted out about enough on this channel, right, but they are still having them. Alright, well I hope you enjoyed the video. Sorry it was such a long time coming. I think I paused it every time I needed to cough. As you can hear, I'm still, despite it now being Wednesday and me having not had to go to work, 2 weeks off Easter holidays, very nice, become a teacher. Unless you like money, but yeah, so apologies for that, but I'm doing the best I can. Hope you enjoyed the video. It has been much asked for, and we are now up to date with faction rundowns until the Beastmen and the Votan arrive, right? I will do video, even though I'm not picking up the minis, I will pick up the book and I will do a video for the Beastmen and the Votan, so you can look forward to that one when it comes out. And I have started, I kind of gave up on painting my Dark Eldar for some reason, it wasn't doing it for me. I'm going to start painting my Kazakin after my tea. I think that's my plan for this evening. So I'm looking forward to that. If you want to see some work in progress and stuff, join the Discord, consider leaving a comment, liking, subscribing, channel membership. I've plunged myself into the channel membership, all those things. Thank you so much and have a great evening. Bye bye.